You must love podcasts if you're listening to this. Do you want to start your own one or you already have one? Then follow Smarter Podcasting to get expert advice from me, Niall, the podcast guy. Since 2019, we've worked with over 40 podcasters, produced over 700 episodes, and helped many podcasts get to the top of the Apple Podcast charts. And right now, I'm offering you a professional edit for just $27. Click the link in the show notes. Hello, it's Niall Mackay, the podcast guy, and I'm back with another episode of Smarter Podcasting just for you. I've been podcasting for years, and most of the time I interview other people on my show. But one thing I've wanted to experiment with is the idea of a solo podcast, just like I'm doing right now. It's a completely different experience to podcasting with a guest or a panel. So in today's episode, I'm going to share with you 5 ways to help you create your own solo podcast or improve yours if you already have one. It can be a daunting experience to get in front of a microphone by yourself and talk for however long you want your podcast to be. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you my top 5 tips to make your solo podcast the best it can be. So let's get started. Number 1, spend time to research your topic. Make sure you do your homework and you've prepared your content for your solo episode. So whether you're an expert or a complete beginner at your topic and your chosen niche, make sure you prepare an outline of the episode topics and what you want to talk about. A full script might be even better. It really depends on who you are. Whether or not you use a full script and follow that completely is completely up to you. I do a bit of both. Sometimes I will have my episode scripted word by word and follow that. And other times, just like now, I can talk about it. I have clients that do both methods. Some can talk about their topic, about their niche, without even thinking, easily for half an hour. One of the things you do have to watch out for if you don't script it is the old classic and ah. There's a big difference between scripting and not scripting, and you will notice it that if you just talk off the cuff, you're probably going to use a lot more filler words. Now, obviously, you can edit them out afterwards, but for a much smoother and better podcast, if you do and ah a lot because you have to think about what you're talking about, then you should probably have a full script. But do make sure you research your topic before you start. It will give you more confidence, it will stop the ums and ahs, and it will make your episode flow better, and you will sound more like the expert that you already are. Now, if you are going to create a podcast just by yourself with just you, just remember how crucial your voice is. Your voice is the only one that people will hear. I hope you like my voice right now. I've been told it's quite nice. Is it quite nice, or is it just the accent? I can't tell. But without a co-host or a guest, there's only one voice to carry that conversation and convey that information. So make sure you share your personality. Nobody wants to listen to a podcast in a monotone voice just describing exactly the information just like this. 70% of what you convey comes from your tone of voice and your body language. Now, don't worry about the body language if you're only doing an audio podcast, but that means that you should use your body language even if you're not recording and even if no one's there. That will come through in the tone of voice. Your tone, your inflection, your pacing, and your energy all have a significant impact on how listeners perceive your podcast and whether or not they're going to stick around for the full episode and come back for more. I've been podcasting for years. I'm a teacher, I'm a stand-up comedian, and I'm used to standing up and talking in front of people. Not everyone has that experience. If you're podcasting solo for the first time, practice on your own, practice at home first. Make sure you get that tone of voice, that excitement, that energy in there so that people want to listen to you. Don't worry if you've never done it before. Everything can be achieved with practice. Take that time to develop your vocal skills. Make sure you use that tone of voice. Go up, go down, slow it down, get excited. Anything that you can do to make sure that your voice is unique. The biggest tip I ever learned doing stand-up comedy, and it applies to podcasting as well, is remember, there is only one of you. You don't need to pretend to be anyone else. Be yourself because nobody else can be you. Once you do that, you've got the market sewn up. Thanks, Bill Hicks, for that advice. I'm from Scotland.
Really?
If you hadn't guessed that already. I do have a warning. There's no subtitles tonight. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. I'm visiting El Paso. My wife's family are from here. Some of them are here. We've been here for 3 days. I've put on 15 pounds. You guys put cheese on top of rice, then some more cheese, then some beans, and then some more cheese, then a little bit more cheese, then you deep fry it. It's good. I like it. My third tip is to create a story arc. Everybody loves a story. If you think of all famous, it's why we love movies, it's why we love books, it's why we love TV shows, even documentaries now all have a story arc. That's why I love watching Netflix. If you have a solo podcast, no matter what it's about, create a story arc. This will help build suspense, create anticipation, and keep your listeners hooked as you take them on a journey through that story. It's also going to help you organize your content in a more structured and meaningful way. You should do that with an introduction, some rising action to get people excited, a climax, some falling action, and then a resolution. Think of any rom-com. They all follow the same story arc. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy. They start to like each other. Then they maybe fall in love. Then one of them does something to mess it up. They have an argument. They fall out. And then suddenly they find each other. They get back together and it's all happy ending. That's the same story arc that you should be following no matter what topic you're talking about. People remember and connect with stories, not just bland, boring information. So take the time to plan out your story arc and you'll be on your way to having a really successful solo podcast. My fourth tip is be vulnerable and be authentic. Vulnerability and authenticity can make all the difference. Your audience wants to hear your unique perspective and experiences, and being open and honest can help you connect with them on a deeper level. Sharing personal stories and struggles can be scary, but it also allows you to create a relatable and human connection with your listeners. Go back to my last episode and I share the biggest mistakes I've made from podcasting. Those are embarrassing. This is my full-time job. I should not be telling you the mistakes that I made, including not pressing record on a podcast. But I'm happy to share that with you to show that I'm a real person and I'm not perfect. I do make mistakes as well. And authenticity is key because it allows you to stay true to your message and your value. Basically, don't be fake. Be who you are. Listeners will be able to tell whether you're being genuine or not, and they'll also appreciate the effort that you're putting into it. Most of all, though, remember to have fun and just let that authenticity shine through. Be yourself, and that's what will keep people coming back. And number 5, for a solo podcast, make sure that you incorporate listener feedback. Listener feedback is a powerful way to build a loyal community of engaged and enthusiastic listeners. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know every episode I ask, go to the notes, there's a link there and you can leave me a message, and when you do, I will feature it in future episodes. I'm always asking other podcasters and friends for feedback on this episode or suggestions for new episodes. Make sure you take that feedback and then you use it. But what you want to be doing with your podcast is not creating something that's distant and exists over there. You want to build a community. You want to make your listeners feel part of it. And by incorporating listener feedback and sharing that on the podcast and incorporating it into everything you do helps build that sense of community. You've chosen your podcast niche because it's something you're passionate about, and people are listening to it because they're passionate about it as well. So why not build it bigger than that? Talk to them on social media, ask for feedback and comments, ask for them to share your posts, build something bigger than just your podcast. And some extra little tips for you as well. You could ask a question, and another couple of extra things that you can do to help your solo podcast is introduce a giveaway. Now remember, introducing a giveaway can be time consuming. So don't say every single listener, message me now and I will send you all a personal handwritten note. It's going to take you forever. Introduce something that's quick and easy, a short game that listeners can get involved with and they can stay engaged with you. Then don't forget as well to have your call to action at the end. Drive listeners somewhere and just one place. So for me, I'm going to ask you at the end of this episode, go to the notes, click on that link, leave me a voice message. What did you think of this episode? What did you think of future episodes? I'll share it on the podcast in future. And the first person to do that, I'm going to give you a free one-on-one consultation call with me. I don't know, is that a prize or a punishment? I'm not sure. But if you want that prize, leave me a message and then you can win it. So you may be thinking, every podcast I hear has somebody interviewing someone else. There's always more than one person on a podcast. So do solo podcasts do well? Well, the success ultimately depends on the quality of the content, your delivery, and who you're targeting. Some of the most successful podcasts out there are hosted by solo podcasters who've built a strong connection with their listeners through their unique voice, interesting topics, natural conversation, and engaging storytelling. You do have to be a confident speaker because the double-edged sword of a solo podcast is you have no co-host, no guest, so you will be doing all the talking. A big advantage of having a solo podcast is that you have complete creative control over the content, which means you can choose the topics you want to cover, the format of the show, and how you want to engage with the audience. Also, if you have a solo podcast, you can often produce them far more easily than with multiple hosts. One of the biggest challenges I hear with podcasters who have multiple hosts is trying to organize a time that both of them are available. It's double the work if you have an extra host, and even interviewing a guest is still double or triple the work than hosting a podcast solo. Just remember though, people like to think that the podcasting space is crowded and there's no room for no podcasts. This couldn't be further from the truth at all. There's something like 6 million new blog posts posted every day versus 250,000 podcasts per week. But if you do want to stand out, focus on quality content. So you do have to put in the time and the effort. But solo podcasts are much faster. So follow these steps for your solo podcast. Give me your feedback. I want to hear from you. And if you do need any advice, then just drop me an email, neil@7millionbikes.com, and I'll be happy to help you out. Happy podcasting. Cheers.
Hi, my name is Sal Jeffries. I run the Mindset, Mood and Movement podcasts. I've been working with Niall at 7 Million Bikes for the whole of this year, literally from the start of my podcast to date. And I want to say a couple of things. So when we record the podcast, sometimes there are things that I need tweaking. There could be edits or clips. It's really simple. I give those instructions to Niall, he gets it sorted. There's sometimes a sound level differences between the guest mic and mine. Again, that's all sorted so the outcome is a really balanced sound. And also if there are issues with voice, little kind of sound interruptions, all those things that can distract a listener, Niall knows exactly what to do, cleans it up. The end result, a highly professional, beautiful sounding podcast without distraction. That's exactly what I want. I know my listeners do. So if you're interested in having that level of podcast and that kind of quality, Niall is a great guy and I highly recommend you speak to him.